Hi, my name's Rob Smith and I'm running Studio 5, Too Many Cooks. So I'm the creative director at Bumpers and Power, which is an immersive multi-sensory design studio based around food and drink. Before that, I studied architecture at Melbourne University, before going into a career in set design and graphic design, before eventually finding myself working through the medium of food and drink. So the themes that we were exploring through this studio were ideas about what the state of food and drink is in Victoria, processes around food. Where do those ingredients come from? What are our relationship with Indigenous ingredients? What kind of food makes up the tapestry that is Melbourne's food landscape? What are all of the different types of ingredients and cuisines that mix together? Melbourne has a particular idea of fusion, an Australian fusion. What does that mean? Beyond that, we've been looking into food growing systems. So looking at agriculture, at aquaculture, at climate as well. We looked at what it means to eat locally and have local produce within our diet. We've been looking at other external factors, such as the commercialization of food systems, what the idea of big supermarket chains have on that, the kind of homogenization of food, and what it means to have a varied diet that speaks to place. So through that medium, we've been exploring hypothetical futures, but through dishes. When I started this studio, I thought I had an idea of what the landscape of food and drink of Melbourne was, what kind of products we're eating, how people ate, the idea that it's a melting pot of individual people and individual cultures that tell a fragmented story of time that is actually quite devoid and separated from the natural landscape and the natural food systems. I imagined more of a whole made up of individual parts that were coexisting but not necessarily coming together. I found that there's a passion and a drive for interconnected relationships of food and drink systems. I found that plates don't look like where they're from historically. There's a drive and a passion of the people within Victoria to create something new that is both respectful of the past, yet looking forward into the future. Those future ideals are sometimes pessimistic and a reaction against that, but mostly immensely optimistic. There's an idea that we can get to a better food state. So something that Victorians is extremely proud of their food, but not to keep it as it is. There's a momentum and a forward momentum to actively engage in creating new things and new food cultures. What I first saw as individual fragments, I now see as a messy soup of culture that's constantly mixing. New ingredients are being added, things being stripped away that are no longer relevant, and we're constantly creating an evolving recipe together within Victoria. So through the studio, Too Many Cooks, we split it into 3 distinct years, with each approaching the theme in a slightly different way. Our first year, we looked broadly. We looked at what the landscape of food and drink was in Victoria, and we asked some questions of ourselves. At the end of that, we imagined what the next 100 years would look like, told through dishes. After that, there was an idea of a slight pessimism. Just come out of lockdown, just come out of COVID, the world's longest lockdown. And that was playing on the students' minds. So we followed that theme, developing into year 2, where we looked at if we're imagining a dystopia, let's roll with it, let's go there. Let's discover and talk to the people who are actively preparing for that dystopia. So we went out and we talked to preppers, people who were food preserving, people who are hoarding and storing food, to look at what does it look like if the apocalypse is coming? What is for dinner in the apocalypse? After that, we wanted to take a slightly right turn and look at some overwhelming optimism. What are people who are building their own utopias, who are building their own communities and societies and food systems with a utopian vision in mind? A way to explore that was through cults and communes, and people who were actively creating their own sub-community groups with an idea of utopia in mind. From there's so much more, and through those 3 years, we discovered so many unique little pockets of Victorian society, which have opened up so many more questions. So there's an enormous untapped potential within Victoria of all of these food stories waiting to be told. What I hope people will take away from this work is a slight consideration of what food means to them and what their plate represents about themselves. When we make food choices, when we go around what restaurants to eat at, what to order, all of these reflect ourselves and our taste and our values. So I hope that through looking at this, we can start to reflect on those values and make choices with an idea of the future in mind. There's a positivity about, as I mentioned, this future idea. I'd like people to take from that they can forge their own futures through the choices that they make and the foods that they eat.